All right, everyone, welcome to day 3 of our Bible study. I know that yesterday was the first day for many of you back in the virtual classroom, which I know presents its own unique challenges, especially for some of you who have small children in your own home that you're trying to take care of and get them through their lessons. So I wanted to let you know that you're doing an awesome job. I mean, everyone is talking about what an amazing job you guys are doing. So keep up the good work. And let this Bible study be an encouragement to you as we look at characteristics of Christ's kingdom from Mark chapter 9. Let's go ahead and turn there in the Bible. Mark chapter 9, starting in verse 30. Jesus has just finished healing this demon-possessed boy. He's making his way through Galilee. He doesn't want anyone to know where he is. He's avoiding large crowds so that he can meet privately with his disciples and teach them about what's about to happen to him and what the kingdom is going to be like when it finally arrives. So he takes them aside and he tells them, I'm going to be delivered over. People are going to kill me, and then I'm going to rise from the dead. This is the second time he's talked about this. And the disciples just don't get it at all. They didn't understand the saying, verse 32, and they were afraid to ask him about it. Probably because they were scared of the answer, to be honest. They knew just enough about what he was talking about to know that they didn't want to know anything more about it. So they continue on their way, and verse 33 says, when they come to Capernaum, Jesus goes into the house and he asks his disciples, hey, what were you guys talking about on the trip over here? He's not asking this because he's looking for information. He knows exactly what they were talking about. And they're silent. I mean, they're ashamed because along the way, Mark says, they had argued with one another about who was going to be the greatest. They were self-focused. They're vying already for the top spots in Christ's kingdom. Now, he's just told them, I'm about to go and die. And they're saying, yeah, that's great. So next week, who's going to sit on your right hand and who's going to sit on your left? Where's my spot going to be? Because I'm definitely a better disciple than that guy. And Jesus uses this failure on their part to teach them an important lesson about the kingdom. The first thing he teaches them is that Christ's kingdom is characterized by humility. Look at verse 35. He sits down and he calls the 12 and he says, if anyone among you would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. You see, Christ's kingdom is not characterized by big shots. It's characterized by servants. I read this great quote this morning that everyone wants to be called a servant until people start treating them like one. So the disciples here, yeah, they like the idea of being a servant like Jesus, but at the end of the day, they want the best spots in his kingdom. And so Jesus says, if you want to be great, be humble. Put yourself last and serve everyone else around you. To give them sort of an object lesson, I know we teachers love good object lessons. He takes a child and he puts them in the middle of the disciples, and he takes this little kid up in his arms and he says, look, you want to know what it looks like to serve everyone around you? Whoever receives a child like this in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not just me, but also him who sent me. So Jesus goes, look, I want you to serve everyone, not just people that you want to serve. We've all got those students who make straight A's and their parents bring in cookies, and let's be honest, they give the best Christmas gifts. We like serving those kids because we hope to get something in return possibly in the future. But what about the kid who makes straight C's? What about the kid who's constantly disrupting your class? What about the kid whose parents never give you gifts? Instead, they send emails criticizing you all the time. Are you willing to serve kids like that? True greatness comes from humbly serving others in Christ's kingdom. There's a second object lesson. This one comes from Mark. He recounts this story where John comes running up to Jesus and he says, Jesus, we just saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we stopped him because he wasn't following us. And it's interesting, the first couple times I read this and really thought about it, I thought, this is good. He's looking out for Jesus' reputation. He wants to vet these miracle workers, but that's not at all what's going on. Remember, John has just failed to cast the demon out of this boy who was having all these seizures. And now all of a sudden, some other guy is coming along and he's got the ability to cast out demons. John isn't concerned about Jesus' reputation. He's concerned about his own reputation. He wants to make sure that this guy is not going to be put higher than me when you come in your kingdom. So he's still focused entirely on himself. And Jesus says, just stop. Because whoever's not against us is for us, right? So I think what Jesus is saying is this. Yeah, there's all kinds of people serving me around you, right? Don't focus on them. Like, oh, they're so much better of a teacher than I am, or they're so much more tech savvy, or they're so much more creative or fun or engaging, or whatever it is. You're constantly looking at the other teachers and other staff members working, and you're comparing your work to their work. And Jesus says, look, stop worrying about others and just do the job that I've called you to do as best as you're able. Stop putting yourself first, put yourself last, and just look for someone that you can serve. So Christ's kingdom is characterized, first of all, by this humble desire to serve. And then second of all, Christ's kingdom is characterized by this radical pursuit of personal holiness, right? And he talks about two different sort of areas of holiness. First of all, public holiness. Look at verse 42. He says, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it'd be better that a millstone were hung around his neck and he's thrown in the sea, which is a really strong way of saying, don't lead other people into sin, right? Don't say that you're a follower of Jesus and then go live exactly like the world, because there's going to be young believers looking at you, your own children perhaps, or your students, and they're going to be tempted to loosen their own moral standards and follow the ways of the world. I think it's interesting. I just want to show you a quick picture from the Zondervan Study Bible. This is a picture of a millstone. The upper millstone, shaped like an hourglass, sits on top of the lower millstone. Jewish farmers would pour grain in here, and then a donkey would turn the upper millstone and it would be crushed into fine powder, and they'd collect it out of this trough and sell it at the market. So that's what Jesus says you can hang around your neck if you're in the business of leading others into sin. The second thing he says, not only leading others publicly into sin, but also we need to radically pursue holiness in our own personal and private lives. And these are some of the most shocking and frankly disturbing verses in the Gospels, verses 43 through 48. If your hand causes you to sin, just chop it right off. If your foot is leading you into sin, go places where you know you shouldn't go, then just saw your foot off. Right? And the worst one, perhaps in verse 47, at least I think it's the worst, is if your eye causes you to sin. If you just can't stop looking at things that you shouldn't be looking at, then just reach in and just rip your eyeball right out of your head. Now, is Jesus really encouraging us to mutilate our bodies? Absolutely not. He's making a very strong point here, and he's saying you should be willing to do whatever it takes to avoid living in sin, even if it means chopping off your hand, chopping off your foot, plucking out your eye. It would be better to go to heaven morally pure and mutilated body than to go into hell with a perfect body that is full of sin. Jesus concludes this idea of purity with this really confusing verse. Verse 49 says, everyone will be salted with fire, which is a weird thing to say. It almost seems like Jesus is mixing two metaphors. Salt was used to purify things in the Old Testament. Fire was used to purify things in the Old Testament. So Jesus is clearly focused on the purifying and also destructive aspects of these two forces. And I think what he's saying, he says everyone is going to experience this, right? So unbelievers are going to experience the destructive nature of over salting and burning, right, in the eternal torments of hell away from the presence of the Lord. That is their fate. But even believers are going to be salted with fire. So what does he mean by that? I think what he means is these disciples, and you and I, are going to go through trials and tests. We're going to experience sadness and suffering in order to lead us into greater purity, greater dependence on Christ, greater desires for holiness, and this radical pursuit of getting rid of all sin in our lives. So the very end of Jesus' teaching, he makes this statement. He says, really combining these two thoughts together, humility and purity. He says, have salt in yourselves, that is, be people who love purity and holiness, and be at peace with one another, which again only happens when we put ourselves last and we humbly look for other people that we can serve instead. So today, let's keep these things in mind. Let's pursue holiness in our personal lives, and let's look for people around us that we can serve to the glory of God. I hope you have a great day. God bless you.